Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Zach Sullivan, co-founder of Grazing Bear Games. His newest tableau card game based on hiking Colorado's highest peaks, called 14ers, is currently on Kickstarter. Zach, welcome to the binge. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, James, doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it is awesome having you. And it's, anytime I see these kind of tableau games, I get this one's definitely got kind of the force shuffle feels, right? And we're going to get into
Yes.
that in a little bit because I love that game. It's so cool, the way things tuck and so forth. But before we get there, my friend, as always, I like to really kind of learn about my guest's history and kind of what they're about in this industry. And this is no different. So let's start with you and I guess you've got a co-founder. So who's a co-founder in your company?
Yeah, so I co-founder Chris, who actually has taken a step back with some family things right now. So he's not an active member right now, but still very close friends and still someone who playtests and helps as is able to. But yeah, definitely been a big part of the story of Grazing Bear Games and my game creation journey. I think I made my first board game when I was 7 or 8 with my friend. We
Wow.
basically took Lego pieces, scattered them around like a Monopoly type roll and move board,
Yeah.
and then assigned them Pokemon cards, basically. And then you were building a character as you picked up things and did battle against each other. It was not original at all, but we loved the process. And then on and off, there were other things like that that I would dabble in as a kid or a teenager.
Did you have a name for that game? What was it called?
Oh, I don't remember. I don't think we had names for most of these.
Yeah, it's interesting though, right? Like you talk to a lot of people who, like my famous story I always tell is Risk, right? So mine was my friends and I would create like nukes, right? So you got up to 10 armies, but if you got to 100 armies, you exchange that. And we had this little piece from the old records, the 45s, that little swirly piece that would click in the center. And that kind of looked like a swirl of like nuclear map. So that was our 100 piece marker we did. And then a lot of people, they talk Monopoly and house rules and things like this. But then combining, that's kind of cool actually, combining Pokemon and then using like almost like a building function to that. At 7 years old, that's quite clever because there's one thing to kind of house rule something, right? There's another thing to start combining different game ideas right out of the gate like that, which is cool, right? Because that tells me, man, this guy was like thinking from the design mindset at a very early age. So did you play a lot of games as a kid? Like it was you and your family, you and your friends, or how did you
Yeah,
guys?
so I mean, we definitely played the classics, Risk, Monopoly,
Yeah.
Scrabble. We love word games and card games and other things. And I mean, a lot of sports, a lot of other stuff that was keeping us busy, but also definitely just kind of love the puzzle and puzzle solving, puzzle creating mindset. Like once I got into algebra, I would make my own like algebra puzzles of like how to solve for different variables and etc. Obviously, huge nerd if you hadn't caught on yet.
Uh,
Um,
and
but yeah, that was a good part of the family, not the main part, but part of a lot of just well-rounded things that our parents got us into and exposed us to a lot of different hobbies and interests and subculture things that gave a lot of different friendships and experiences to be able to draw from in life.
And then your first official game, because I know that you've done some roll and writes. And there's some games prior to the current campaign that we'll talk about in a moment. But
Mhm.
what was that first game you launched, and when was that?
So yeah, the print and play flip and write games were the first like Kickstarter
Hmm.
campaign, and I would call those the first published games.
Yeah,
14ers will be our first game in a box,
yeah.
and there's other things that I've made that shared with friends and family, but haven't published in any sort of professional format. But if you did you want to hold off on talking about
Yeah,
the
I want to talk about this
print and
flip
play
and right you're
games?
just mentioning. So it's flip and right. When did you launch that? When was that
Yeah,
first in
so
the market?
last November we did that Kickstarter campaign. We timed it for like right after the election
Mm.
until right before I think the beginning of December and like the holiday season starts. So um, we had my the co-founder Chris and I, we had gone to the same church for a while
Mm,
and had become close friends for that. And we knew we both loved board games. And then just kind of happens to mention in passing, like, oh hey, I think it was like his family like Christmas card or something that they have like a family update and etc. Mentioned that he was designing board games, and then I had gotten back into it during COVID. I'd been running D&D games for my family and friends, and then I kind of re-clicked that designer mindset and so started making some games. Of course, the first ones were terrible, but good uh, steps to start learning, and started, of course, listening to Board Game Design Lab, reading Jamie Stegmaier's blog, all the
sure.
typical first things to get in and learn and start just dabbling. And I don't even know if I had aspirations of making these published products, more of just I've got the time on my hands. My wife and I really like board games. We're hopeless Dominion addicts, and a number of other games that have been filling up our shelves just off camera over here. So just thinking it was for us to enjoy. That's cool. Was tinkering with those for a while and learning the craft, and found out that he was doing that as well. So hey, let's try out each other's games, and we enjoyed them a lot. And then he really kind of had the initiator spark of like, what if we did something? What if we try to run a Kickstarter and get stuff out there? And I said, okay, like if we do this, like let's do it right. Let's invest. Let's get together a playtest group. Let's do our homework and take our time about this. And he was in, so we found more of the we knew some of the like gaming groups in town, and we found more of them, and started reaching out to, hey, is anyone else making their own games and playtesting, and found some folks who were and actually knew way more about it than us,
Yeah.
and just being parts of the community, and started a monthly playtest meetup and some Discord servers. And
And this is all for this original flipping right?
no, this was just that we had other ideas,
Hmm.
like other much bigger games that we knew, like we're not starting with these big, 90-minute euros. Like we're going to start off with just learning and connecting to the community and
Yeah,
honing our
smart.
craft and having a good time. Not going to put any pressure on this. Then we realized, okay, if we were going to, build up to things, I know there's kind of the model of like, okay, we're going to dive right into the deep end, and we're going to take like 4 years to build up to our one
Yeah.
big Kickstarter campaign for our $99 game. And that can be done really well. I mean, like Galactic
Hmm.
Cruise and like other things, like people can do that really well
Yeah.
over a lot of time. And I didn't want to wait that long. And also, we wanted to minimize our risk. But like, okay, hey, let's start off with just bite-sized things that we knew that we were starting from the ground floor, and we needed to level up in our game design skills, our playtesting and taking notes and iterating on systems, and how do we build an audience and get stuff out there, how do we
Yeah.
get art and like art direct, and so many publisher things that that for a lot of members of your audience know that we barely knew anything about, other than like a Jamie Stegmaier article or
Yeah.
something. So it was like we decided that let's start with making some small design challenges for ourselves, just to kind of force ourselves to start small. So like starting with the flip and write games was one challenge that we set for ourselves of, let's start off with these small simple games that have done well during COVID.
And that
There's a
was
lot
all
of
print
roll
and
and write
play.
games.
It's like that was all digital
Yeah,
assets. You send the digital assets, they print it off themselves and so forth. Yeah.
yep. Um, and started set some designs for 18 card games, which is actually how 14ers started. It's a
Hmm.
lot more than 18 cards now, but the core was there, just setting those constraints on ourselves to help simplify things and engage creativity more within a really defined narrow space, and then letting those things, the best ideas rise to the top from that, and making those starting points that, okay, say for print and play games, your only expense is whatever arts that you want to pay for. And maybe if you pay for a Dropbox server, which you can get for free at different levels.
Hmm.
And I think we paid to go to events to do more playtesting
Nice.
at things. And so that was it. Just like several $100s for three different print and play games, and each game individually made more than enough to cover that cost. So it was not like a big number of profit, but it was profit that we made, and it was also minimal risk for us that we didn't have to take a second mortgage
Hmm.
or whatever to fund all the custom miniatures for our dungeon crawler dream game or something like that. And then now with 14ers, that it's box this big, and it's primarily just tarot sized cards. So dabbling into manufacturing with kind of bite sized introductions, and then uh, the whole print run should fit on one pallet
Yeah.
coming over here, depending on the size of the print run. We'll see based on the final numbers for the Kickstarter.
So
How large a print order we make,
the
but
flipping right. I just want to jump in on this. So you're flipping right.
yep.
So the Chateau Gardens was Volatile Vintage. Noble Escape, I think was the name of it.
Mm-hmm.
Three games for $8. 1 to 8 players. People get digital assets and print it themselves, right? So that campaign had 176 backers. You guys did, looks like about $1,800 in
Mm-hmm.
terms of funding. Maybe there's some in late pledges as well. So not huge, but that's okay, because I think the key point that I want to hone in on there for people looking to get into this industry is that you can start small, right? And I've said this many times on prior episodes. If people want to get into try being a game designer, they can be a game designer and literally print it at Game Crafter, right? And make 10 copies and just give them to their close friends and families, and they can kind of be done with it if they just want to do that. If they want to take it to the next step, I like what you said about starting. We very much did this the same with Tin Robot Games, more on the business side of how can I mitigate the risk, how can I do small launches and try to learn from each of these launches as we go and build up. So over the span of 5 years, it was each campaign was getting a little bit bigger, but very bite size in terms of being able to manage it, leading up to then finally when we did Cities of Venus, which is our first 6-figure campaign. But it was a accumulation of all those learnings of those prior campaigns getting up there. And the cool thing about starting small like that is you can experiment, right? You can try different things.
Yeah.
You can try different pledge managers. You can try different marketing companies if you want. You can try doing the meta ads yourself. You can try to do utilize different audience building techniques and things like that. And that trial and error has very little risk, because especially with something like a print and play, there's no stuff, right? Like it's your time, and time's obviously worth money, but your time is your input in without actually having to invest physical cash. So I think it's very, very smart what you guys did there. And I just wanted to kind of touch on that, because I think it's important for other people that are maybe looking at this industry and saying, how do I get started? And gosh, I can't compete with the big guys out there in these large campaigns. I don't have an audience yet. Like, how am I going to do this? You don't have to go crazy, right? You can start small and contained, and then build from there. And it's that seed that once that germinates, that you can really start building something pretty special. So sorry for cutting you off. I just wanted to kind of inject on that, because that's something I think is really important. So when it led into 14ers, this whole idea of hiking and in hiking these Colorado peaks, are you guys like mountaineers yourself, or where did this idea come from?
Yeah, so my wife is definitely the expert mountaineer. She, like 15 years ago, decided that she wanted, or maybe 12 or so, decided that she wanted to go to Everest Base Camp. She had seen pictures or read a book or had a friend who had gone to that. And so Everest, the summit is 29,000 feet. The base camp is only 18,000 feet, which is still very high altitude. But the trek there is not really technical. It's more of a hike that you can fly into the Lukla airport and then hike for a few weeks, going from like one tea house to the next. You said, hey, I want to do that. But we're living in Alabama, and I believe she was living in Alabama at the time. So it was like, I need to get some, experience and training and figure this out. And so then she started going out to Colorado and climbing the 14ers over there, meeting mountains that are over 14,000 feet. And so in the like contiguous 48 US states. There's like two in Washington State and 12 in California. And then there's 53 or to 58 in Colorado. It depends how you count them based on things like how high they stick out from the surrounding land, how far away they are from another nearby peak. But general count is either 54 or 58 for them. And so she's now done, I think, 43
Mm.
of them. And she is super experienced, super accomplished. And we do enjoy the outdoors and hiking. I've done three of those 14ers now
Wow.
myself. And I decided to apply that to the game that I think was after Proto ATL one year, which, if you're not familiar, it's a playtesting and kind of industry focused event in Atlanta that is largely just designers openly playtesting each other's games, but also getting to meet with publishers and other people in the industry. And so I think we were driving back from that one year, and I was kind of thinking in my head. And so one of the things was setting that challenge for myself of doing an 18 card game. And so I was trying to think, okay, it was limited cards. So how do we get the most game out of it? Obviously, multi-use cards. How do we, do that without, you know, writing 7 paragraphs on every single little card? Okay, well, let's just tuck them under different sides to give them, different abilities. And so kind of came up with that core mechanism, right? Let's have like a cost or requirement for each one. And then was thinking through, okay, what's the theme that when you meet the requirement for something, then you get better and go on to the next one. Like, oh yeah, it's exactly how my wife describes going through the different 14ers, that they're organized in real life and in the game by the class rating, which is how technical it is. So there's classes 1 to 5, but the 14ers standard routes are only 1 to 4.
Mm-hmm.
And so then usually it's just, hey, you start with your class ones, which are basically a hike. Then you go into your class twos, which might have a little bit of scrambling on them. Class three will have some real climbing with it. And then class four, you're roped in, your helmet is on, you're like defying death, just making it there. So obviously you got to build up, your stamina, your endurance, your acclimatization to the altitude, your experience, and kind of feel for like what rock is steady and not, and other things like that. And so yes, that's perfect. Let's you know line up these mountains so that people can then start off with the easier ones, and then they'll build up their skills to be able to tackle the later ones and get more points later on. And it ended up sticking and working really well. And we found I had done 1 or 2 14ers by the time that I started working on the game. I've done more since then,
Mm-hmm.
and done several like 13ers and 12ers and shorter mountains as well. So I was newer to it when I started working on the game a few years ago. And as I just, learned more and picked my wife's brain about the craft and read some of the books that she already had, finding more things to connect the theme and the game was a ton of fun. And it's been really cool to be able to highlight that kind of niche sport and niche challenge for gamers.
And in terms of the tableau building, so again, this a la kind of four shuffle mechanism, um, which I've been dying to incorporate that in a game. At some point, I will. Just this whole tucking from the sides, tucking from the top, tucking from the bottom is just so clever, and there's so many different ways that could be utilized. And I mean, you've just demonstrated one here, which I think is really cool. Is skill set, equipment, and so forth, which is pretty cool. What was your inspiration for that? Was it what came first? Was it the mechanism, saying how can I incorporate this mechanism, or was it more, hey, I've got to try to figure out how to do these upgrades and this cumulative experience, and I got to find kind of a clever way to make that work in the tableau? Like, what kind of came first?
So I think the tugging mechanism came first in like a very bare bones,
Mm,
like, okay, we're gonna have different abilities on the sides of the card, and we're gonna tuck them under a central tableau, choose a side. Then it chose a theme for 14ers, and that was like, I think before I even made the first prototype of the game that I had paired those, and then they grew in tandem. And that's often been my process
mm,
of um, you know, core loop, core mechanism that I like and that I want to work with? What's a good theme? And then how can we actually build out the game to connect the theme and the mechanism? So there's a number of different, nods to theme and some uh, names and kind of alternate pathways that are connecting to the theme. And there's some, fun art and fun facts and etc. with that. But they both came to it like very early on. The first afternoon I started like ideating the game was when we hit on both of those, and they've stuck together and grown from there.
So, for those who haven't checked out the page yet, can you explain kind of in descriptive words how do you play 14ers? Like, what would a game look like?
Yeah, so the game is a simple tableau builder, like we said, where each player is a hiker. You have a hiker card that's going to be the center of your tableau, and you're going to see different climb cards that have a different mountain on them. And those mountains will have requirements of boot and axe icons represent your endurance and your technique that you need to be able to climb the mountain. If you have enough icons to meet or beat those requirements, then you can grab the card and tuck it under one of the different sides, excuse me, of your hiker. And so then when you tuck it, that'll expose one ability that will give you bonuses to have more boots and axes, or more backpacks, which are wilds, or more ways to interact with the deck, or to gain benefits from your opponents, or more ways to score points. And so you go through 9 rounds of the game. Every player takes one turn and gains one new climb on each turn. And you might have different variable scoring goals. You might have to navigate the challenges of weather, a lot of variability built into the box. But that core loop of just meeting the requirements, gaining that climb, tucking it under one side, that's the core loop of the game. Once you get to 9 rounds, you'll count up the cards that you've tucked for scoring and how they build off other things across your tableau. See how you did for the competitive scoring goal, and most points wins.
It's very cool. I like the idea of, again, this kind of mechanism. The one bone I have to pick with like Forest Shuffle, for example, is just how long the game goes. It's a very simple mechanism, right? But it for me, it overstays its welcome a little bit. Whereas something that's a little more kind of, I guess, tighter would be the way I would explain the game you've got here. Which allows you to play in a more condensed time frame, which I think is pretty cool. The fact you've also got a solo play. So how does a solo play then work? Is it played against an autonoma, or is it based on hitting certain
It's
requires?
like a two-step automa, basically.
Okay.
And you're right, shorter time. Once two people know what they're doing, they can knock out a game of 14ers in 20, 25 minutes. And the other thing that I'll shamelessly self-promote here is that Four Shuffle spreads all across the table,
Yeah, it's a
which
table
is
hog.
great and it looks so good. But also 14ers like tucks really tightly. A two-player game you can play within like 2 square feet. So it can be played at the bar, at the beach. We've taken it up on mountainsides and played just like on the rocks
Oh,
there.
nice.
So, but going back to your original question of
Solo.
solo mode, yes. So the Automa takes the normal Tableau building and is just automated. The cards come out, the climb cards with the mountains on them. Instead of just being a revealed row where the order doesn't matter, now it's a card river that whatever shuffles to the end of the card river goes to Jerry, is his name, named after a famous mountaineer. And so Jerry will just automatically take the one at the end. Based on what class it is, he'll automatically slide it under one side or another of his hiker card. And then he'll score points the same way. He just doesn't have to worry about like actually meeting the requirements. He just automatically gets them,
Mm-hmm.
which Jerry in real life, Jerry Roach, the hiker, was an incredible and still is. He was still hiking into his 80s and is just a boss who holds a lot of records and literally wrote the book on 14ers. So it was pretty cool to name it after him. But if you're in solo mode, you're still building up your tableau of how do I build up a good engine of my boots and axes and my ability to interact with the deck and get the climbs that I want and need from those points, also managing okay, whatever I don't pick, like, has a really good chance of going off to Jerry. And, if he's building up these things, can I afford for him to get that one? Or, can I try and force him to get this one that would be really poor value for him? and just adding a little bit of extra complexity, especially if you're using the weather, that he doesn't have to worry about the weather either. And that's extra limitations on you, extra challenge for the solo player to be able to do that. And the hardest level of the weather, I can barely beat the solo mode
Hmm.
on. But the decision making is just what's at the end of the card river, what class is it? Okay, we put it under that side, and then he scores the exact same way that you do. So it goes very quickly and doesn't take up a lot of decision trees or etc. for the solo mode.
Why the decision to go with tarot size cards?
Because there's no room on poker cards. We both wanted to give the different abilities and the text on them breathing room so
Hmm.
that it looked nicer and was actually legible, especially from across the table. Looking at what does my opponent have? Do I maybe want to hate draft a little bit against what they're doing? But then also, we were super lucky that we got some really nice art from a local Coloradan. Their studio is called Hinterland Outdoors, and we think their art deserves to be shown off on like bigger cards
Hmm.
that give a little bit of room for the illustrations to shine as well. The artist has actually climbed all the peaks in real life,
Oh
and he
wow.
based all of the illustrations on his own photos, his own memories of them. So there's no AI used in the art, and tarot cards very quickly became the clear choice for how we both make the gameplay function better and just all the words clear and by far make it look prettier.
Like, did it raise any challenges from a manufacturing standpoint, or in terms of like box sizes and things like this? Did you run into any of that?
Not really. Most manufacturers these days are willing to work with you. I mean, tarot cards are pretty common
Yeah.
now, and so we were able to work with the print sheet sizes, and some printers even have the rolling print sheets that will basically go with whatever
Yeah.
card counts that you need for it. We were able to get 400 GSM thickness of cards, so there's a nice weight to them that helps them kind of sit in your tableau better, and getting the right cards. Once we were able to go to Origins and meet our manufacturer's reps there and get their sample cards and talk a little bit more with them, it was pretty good to see that and then clear like, yep, this is the right call for
Yeah.
the game. They were super helpful for getting us the right details and right pricing that we needed. So not an issue for this game. But I know that like for some gamers, you wanted to keep it simple, and that wasn't that I for the first few months I stuck with I think we can make it poker cards for simplicity and for cheapness and etc. And some of my friends who are more experienced kept pushing like, hey, I think this is the right call, and they were absolutely
Well, you're using Hopes, which is a
yep.
great manufacturer. I've used them myself. They're fantastic, right? They have very very high quality standards, and they always deliver without issues. So it's cool to see that on your page as well. What's kind of the plan from here? So you're obviously a publisher now, right? You've got a couple games in
Mm-hmm.
your belt. This will be your first physical game that you're putting out, as you mentioned. But have you mapped out kind of what the plan is going forward? Like what can we expect?
Yeah, well, the first thing is finish Kickstarter strong and start finalizing things and get the print files over to Hopes to start their production run for 14ers and following up with retailers. Also, my wife is having a baby in December, so this will be our second.
Oh,
So
congrats! Wow.
thank you. Yeah, so we'll be a little distracted with that, but trying to get a lot of stuff off to the printer or kind of off in other people's hands before the baby gets here so we can focus on our family. And we've built in some extra margin into the timelines to account for that. That'll be a little busy
Nice.
around the holidays and such with that. And yeah, we will be focused on fulfilling and shipping out 14ers next summer, probably into Q3. And we've got some other games in the pipeline, not ready to announce yet,
Mm.
but once we get 14ers out in backers' hands, then we'll start talking more publicly about the next game that we'll be doing.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, for those who want to check this out, I think they should. It's pretty cool, and especially if you like the mechanism of tableau building with cards that tuck and so forth. I'm going to put a link in the show notes for people to check out. If you go on to Kickstarter, it is under the Project Your Love status, so it might even show up in
Mhm.
people's For You pages. But it's 14ers as in the number 1, the number 4, and then ERS. Search it, they'll find it. Still 14 days to go. Ironically, we're talking today 14ers, and there's still 14 days going to campaign. It is already fully funded, so it's not a question of whether this is going to hit the market. It is. Now it's just a matter of how much you're going to blow past your funding goal. Zach, I want to wish you all the best on this campaign, man. This is so cool to see this incremental process you've taken to approach the industry, and it seems to be paying out in spades for you. So I want to wish you all the best.
Thanks so much, James. I'm really excited and super grateful for the support we've had from a lot of great people. And thanks also to you for having me on here.
No worries. Take care, man. Cheers.
You too.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.